I would like to share with you 3 common mixing mistakes. If you're struggling to get the results that you want from your mixes, it may be that some of these apply to you. Solving mistake 3 is especially powerful, and it's one of the best things you can do to improve your mixes and your music making in general. Hey, my name's Alexander White, and every week I'm bringing you tips, tricks, and techniques to help you get recordings, mixes, and productions that you're proud of. Okay, so let's jump in. Mistake number 1 is not setting a fader balance initially when you start your music. This is so incredibly powerful. A lot of the time when you start mixing, what you want to do is just dive right in and start turning up kick drums and start EQing kick drums, then turn up snares and start EQing snares. The problem is it's also completely out of context. You've got no idea really what anything needs to sound like because it only matters how it sounds against the other things in your mix. So the very first thing to do is get hold of your mix and just do the very best mix you possibly can with nothing more than faders and pans, and spend a little bit of time. Don't rush through it. Don't just throw things up and hope for the best. Spend a little bit of time seeing how does it sound if the overheads are louder than the kick and snare? How does it sound if the synthesizer is the center of your mix and everything is built around it? Just try these things out. One of the really big advantages is it stops you overusing processing tools like EQ and compression. Because when you set your balance, your mix is already somewhat in the region of where you want it to be. You've sort of worked out where volumes need to be or how balances are going to be set. The actual distance that you need to go, say with an EQ, is a lot smaller. If you start with no fader mix, no basic starting point, you may start to get into your mix and discover that you're pushing too much on an EQ to try to compensate for something which is actually just a level change. The other massive benefit of it is it gives you a wonderful reference mix. So one of the things I love to do is when I've done my fader mix and panned my instruments to where I want them to be, and I've got the best sounding thing I can possibly have with just that, I like to export that mix and have it as a reference. So when I'm actually mixing, if my ears start to get tired or I don't notice, but I've just been mixing for too long, I can jump back and listen to it, because often it reminds you of the things that you loved about your production and your recordings. And it's so important not to get too far away from those things, because that's what you loved initially. You spent all that time writing the music, getting it recorded, spending all the time making your synths sound like something, to then go into the mix and start to change all that. Well, you can often be really disappointed with those results. So it's great to have that little reminder. And the other thing is sometimes it's all you need to do. So often with mixing, we feel like we have to do things, that there are certain functions or processes which without a doubt we can't not deliver. That's actually not true. You can absolutely get a brilliant mix by just turning up the faders and setting the pans. This works especially well with natural styles of music, jazz, classical recordings, acoustic styles, folk, but also kind of, roomy natural rock and things like that can sound absolutely stunning with just a fader mix. So I've got a track here with all of the faders down, and I'm just going to turn things up and get a rough balance that feels really good, that suits the song. Here we go.
I'm worth it, yeah. So watch me go. So now I see you there, sitting on your gold chair, looking down on me, but I see the ice is wearing thin. I'm stronger than you know, and I'm better on my own. I'm moving my own way. I'm gonna prove you wrong. Don't defy me. I know I'm better by myself, 'cause you try me, yeah, and it's getting bad for my health. You don't own me.
And we would continue on from there, just refining and checking out different ways of balancing. You saw that I was turning things up louder, making them softer, finding where they sit in the mix, and more importantly, where you want them to sit in the mix. Creatively, how do you want this to come across? Now, mistake number 2 is not learning the tools that you have before going out and looking for new ones, whether that's a plugin or a new preamp. When you spend time learning your tools, you'll discover hidden ways of using it. I've got a great demo coming up shortly of exactly this kind of thing. You'll also become so familiar with the tools that you have that you become instinctively aware of how they're going to help a sound. Now, sound will forever be a reactive process, not a proactive process. You will always need to hear the sound first before making a decision. But when you get really familiar with your tools, you have a solid gut instinct of what that thing is going to do to whatever particular source. If you keep jumping around all of these different plugins and all of these different tools, you never get that familiarity, and it will make your mixes worse because of it. Really, you just end up leaving your mixes to random chance. Further to that, you will save so much time because you won't be scrolling through endless lists of plugins, and when you finally decide on the plugin you want to use, you won't pull up the interface and go, "What do I do? I don't know where any of the buttons are," which is a horrible feeling and really slows down the creative process. Okay, let me give you a demo of some hidden features within a plugin. Of course, they're not really hidden, they're just sound generating devices, but they're things you may not realize unless you really dig into them. Let's pick a classic, an 1176 compressor, which loads of us have seen and used. We're going to try it on a bass track, so let me play the track and then we'll dig into the 1176. Okay, so let me load up an 1176. Here we go. When we load it up, the default settings are just attack about middle, release at 5, and we've got the input and the output set at something. So let's hit play and see what it does. Okay, it starts compressing. But did you know that if you make the attack and the release the fastest on an 1176, it actually adds a little bit of bite and crunch to the signal purely because of the speed that the compressor is compressing by. Let's listen. And that accentuates if we give it even more compression. So I'll turn the compression up, level compensate a little bit. You can really hear that grime coming in. Now, if we pull the release back, say to roughly the default 5, and have a listen, oh, and the attack back as well. The distortion actually goes away. Now, it's not about right or wrong, it's about what you're looking for. But Did you know the 1176 can give you that crunch and grime just by adjusting the attack and the release? Of course, lots of us do know about the all buttons in mode, which is where you shift click in the Universal Audio version. Different plugins do it differently, but you shift click on any of these ratio buttons and they will give you different combinations of the all buttons in mode. Now that's often quite documented, so that's not a surprising one. But sometimes something you might not know is if you click the off button on the attack, suddenly the 1176 can just become a distortion box. So it's now no longer going to compress, but if you keep turning up the input and of course level adjust the output, you actually get a really gnarly distortion out of it. Let me show you. In the right context, on the right source, that can be really cool. But if you only ever pulled up the 1176, had a quick play to see if it did what you wanted and chuck it away and move on to the next one, well, you're never going to know about these things and you could be missing out on entire sounds because you haven't spent the time really digging into your current set of tools. You will be a better mix engineer if you spend time learning a small selection of tools intimately well, rather than having access to everything. And finally, mistake number 3, and I honestly think this is the biggest one and will do the most for your mixes. And it's not even a plugin or a preamp or a compressor or some speakers. It's just simply taking a really decent break. I know it sounds really dull, but honestly, if you have those big mammoth mixing sessions where you swear you've got the best mix in the world and then you finish, wake up the following day, play the mix expecting it to be an absolute banger, and it turns out that it's wrong. It's just all wrong. Or worse yet, you go and excitedly send it to people or play it to your friends and they just go, that doesn't sound right, dude. Worse yet, you do it to a client. You send it off to a client. This was the biggest change I made, which really started to make my mixes actually work. I have different stages now of where I take a big break in my mixing. So I will do my fader mix and then I will leave it. Then I'll come back and when I play, I'm instantly hit with all the big things that need addressing. So I go and address those. That's kind of my core mix. So I'm making sure that I'm getting some reverb on vocals. I'm doing my compression, and then leave it. And when I say leave it, I don't mean pop off for half an hour. I mean leave it overnight. So when you're doing your mixes, give your mixes like a 3-day time frame. You're not working on your mix all day every day. You're just working for a few hours. And you'll probably find that the actual amount of time you spend on your mix becomes much less overall, even though it takes more days before you have a finished result. It's a better result and you've actually spent less time on it. In that time, you can be working on your other mixes and listening to music and just absorbing other general ideas. What this does is it acts as a sort of palate cleanser for your brain and your ears. So when you come back to it, because you've sort of forgotten what you did, you end up having this wonderful experience as if you're listening to it for the first time. And that tells you everything that's wrong or right, because one of the big issues when we mix is we tend to do something, make a change we're happy with, and because we keep listening, we kind of get bored of that change. And so you think it needs more still, and then you think it needs more. And probably you're 5 stages ahead of where you actually needed to stop, where it was actually good. And now at this point, you've just put too much distortion, too much compression. You've done some weird EQ choices. You've brightened it up because your ears have got tired and everything feels dull. And then you've got razor blades to listen to the following day. Take a break. Take big breaks. Split your mix up over a few days. So I have an action step for you. I want you to go away, make a fader mix, and then leave it. Leave it overnight, maybe even leave it for a few days. Come back, make some basic changes, make the most critical changes to your mix, so the really obvious stuff, and then leave it. And make sure you finish your mix with these incremental little changes over a longer period of time. You can also work on other mixes at the same time. You know, this works by doing a little bit on this one, a little bit on this one, a little bit on this one, and then moving on. But see how that goes and let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this has been really helpful. I genuinely believe in these 3 mixing steps to improve on fixing these mixing mistakes. And I would really love to know if any of these resonate with you as well. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.